3 years. That was how long the world's youngest heiress had lived in absolute silence. Dominic Caldwell possessed a fortune of $40 billion, yet he couldn't buy the one thing he wanted most: the sound of his daughter's voice. Doctors called it selective mutism caused by early trauma. Dominic called it his personal hell. But on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle, inside the city's most exclusive restaurant, the silence didn't just break, it shattered. When little Lily Caldwell finally opened her mouth, she didn't call for her father. She didn't ask for a toy. She pointed a trembling finger at a trembling waitress covered in spilled wine and screamed a single word that would tear 2 lives apart and expose a crime buried in the dark. Mama. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Sarah Miller felt the dampness seeping through the soles of her worn-out black non-slip shoes as she hurried through the service entrance of the Gilded Cage. It was fitting, she often thought. The restaurant was exactly that. A cage where the city's elite came to flash their Amex black cards, and people like Sarah came to disappear. "You're late, Miller," the floor manager, Henry, snapped. He was a short man who wore cologne that smelled like desperate ambition. "Table 4 is reserved for a VIP. If you mess this up, don't bother coming back for the dinner shift tomorrow." "I'm sorry, Henry. The bus broke down on 4th Avenue, Sarah murmured, keeping her head down. She quickly tied her apron, the white fabric stark against her faded black uniform. At 26, Sarah looked older. Grief did that to a person. It carved hollows under the eyes and etched lines around the mouth. It had been 3 years since the incident at St. Jude's Hospital, the day she woke up from an emergency C-section to a somber-faced doctor telling her that her baby girl hadn't made it. There was no body to hold, they said. "It's better this way," they had told her. State policy on stillbirths with complications. She had been too drugged, too poor, and too alone to fight them. Now, she was just a ghost drifting through tables, pouring vintage Bordeaux for men who looked through her as if she were made of glass. "He's here," a busboy whispered, rushing past her with a tray of crystal glasses. The Caldwell entourage. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly. It wasn't just a change in noise level, it was a change in air pressure. Dominic Caldwell walked in, and the room seemed to tilt toward him. Dominic was 32, with the kind of sharp, predatory handsomeness that looked good on magazine covers but terrifying in person. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sarah's entire life earnings. But it wasn't his wealth that drew the eye, it was his coldness. He looked like a man who had forgotten what warmth felt like. On his arm was Vanessa Holt, beautiful, blonde, and possessing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was a socialite, the kind of woman who treated charity galas as combat sports, but trailing behind them, pushed in a custom-made velvet wheelchair by a nanny, was the source of all the tabloid speculation: Lily Caldwell. The 3-year-old girl was a doll, porcelain-skinned with dark, curly hair, but her eyes were vacant. She stared at nothing, her small hands folded in her lap, motionless. She was the silent princess, the child who had never spoken a word since birth. "Table 4, Miller. Now!" Henry hissed, shoving a menu into Sarah's hand. Sarah took a deep breath. She smoothed her hair, plastered on the professional mask she wore like armor, and approached the table. "Good evening, Mr. Caldwell, Ms. Holt," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Welcome to the Gilded Cage. May I start you with sparkling water?" "No ice," Vanessa cut her off without looking up from her phone. "And bring a high chair for the girl, though I doubt she'll eat. She never does in public." Dominic sat heavily, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted. He glanced at his daughter with a mixture of profound love and helpless frustration. "Just water for me as well. And bring Lily the mashed potatoes, the truffle ones. She likes the texture." "Of course, sir," Sarah said. She turned to the child. For the first time, Sarah looked directly at Lily. The world stopped. It wasn't a poetic exaggeration. For Sarah, the noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the jazz piano, the low hum of conversation, dropped into a vacuum. The child had dark curls, just like Sarah's mother had. She had a small, heart-shaped birthmark just below her left earlobe. Sarah's breath hitched. Her hand flew to her own neck, instinctively covering the exact same spot on her own skin. "It's a coincidence," Sarah told herself, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Lots of kids have dark curls. Lots of kids have birthmarks. But the eyes. Those were Sarah's eyes. A distinctive, flecked hazel, green with bursts of amber. "Are you deaf?" Vanessa's sharp voice pierced the fog. "I said, we are in a hurry." Sarah snapped back to reality, blinking rapidly. "Apologies, Mum. Right away." She retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the order pad. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, gasping for air. "Get it together, Sarah," she whispered to herself. "Your baby is dead. Dr. Roberts said so. You saw the death certificate. This is just a rich man's daughter. Stop torturing yourself." But as she waited for the truffle potatoes, she couldn't shake the feeling, a magnetic, visceral pull that felt like a hook in her gut, dragging her back to table 4. The dinner service was a disaster waiting to happen. The tension at the Caldwell table was palpable. Vanessa was complaining about the wedding preparations, a wedding Dominic seemed to be agreeing to merely out of exhaustion rather than desire. "The florist needs a deposit by Friday, Dom," Vanessa said, sipping her wine. "And I'm thinking we should send Lily to boarding school in Switzerland after the honeymoon. There's a specialist facility there. It would be better for us to start our marriage without the burden of a special needs child in the house." Dominic slammed his water glass down. "She is not a burden, Vanessa. She is my daughter. And she is 3 years old. I am not shipping her to Switzerland." "She's broken, Dominic," Vanessa hissed, lowering her voice but maintaining the venom. "She doesn't speak. She doesn't connect. You need a wife, and you need a normal life. I'm trying to give you that." Sarah approached with the tray, her stomach churning at Vanessa's words. How could a woman speak about a child that way? Sarah placed the truffle potatoes in front of Lily. The little girl didn't move. She just stared at the white tablecloth. "Here you go, sweetie," Sarah said softly. It was a breach of protocol. Waiters weren't supposed to be familiar, but she couldn't help it. At the sound of Sarah's voice, Lily's head snapped up. The movement was so sudden, so sharp, that even Dominic looked surprised. Lily locked eyes with Sarah. The little girl's nostrils flared. Her small chest heaved. It was as if she was smelling a scent she had been searching for her entire short life. "What is she doing?" Vanessa asked, annoyed. "She's staring at the help." Sarah felt frozen in place. She should walk away. She should go get the wine for table 7. But she couldn't move. She looked into those hazel eyes, her eyes, and felt a wave of grief so potent it nearly knocked her over. Without thinking, Sarah reached into her apron pocket. She always carried a small, cheap plastic charm, a blue bear, that she had bought when she was 6 months pregnant. It was her talisman, the only thing she had left of the baby she never got to hold. Do you like bears?" Sarah whispered, holding the cheap trinket out in her palm. "Excuse me," Vanessa snapped, standing up. "Do not offer my stepdaughter your garbage." Vanessa reached out and slapped Sarah's hand. It wasn't a hard slap, But it was enough. The plastic bear flew from Sarah's hand and skittered across the table. In the confusion, Sarah's other hand knocked over Vanessa's glass of red wine. The crimson liquid splashed all over Vanessa's white silk dress. "You idiot!" Vanessa shrieked. The entire restaurant went silent. "Do you have any idea how much this costs, you clumsy, incompetent trash?" Henry, the manager, was running over, his face pale. "I am so sorry, Ms. Holt. I will handle this immediately. Miller, get out. You're fired. Get your things and—" "No." The word was soft, barely a whisper. But it stopped everyone cold. It hadn't come from Dominic. It hadn't come from Sarah. Everyone turned to the high chair. Lily was gripping the edge of the table with white-knuckled force. Her eyes were wide, filled with tears, fixed solely on Sarah. "Lily," Dominic breathed, disbelief washing over his face. He leaned in. Did you say something, baby?" Lily ignored her father. She ignored Vanessa, who was dabbing at her dress with a napkin. The little girl reached out her arms toward Sarah. It was a desperate, clawing motion. "Mama," Lily said. It was louder this time, clear, unmistakable. Vanessa froze. What did she say? "Mama!" Lily screamed now, the sound tearing from her throat like a physical wound opening up. She began to thrash in the high chair, fighting the straps. "Mama! Mama!" She pointed a finger directly at Sarah. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The world tilted on its axis. The grief she had buried, the death she had accepted, the lies she had been told, it all collided with the reality of this screaming child. She called her Mama. A diner at the next table whispered, "Get away from her." Vanessa lunged, trying to block Lily's view of Sarah. "The child is confused. She's having an episode. Dominic, do something." But Dominic wasn't looking at Vanessa. He was looking at Sarah. He was looking at the waitress who had just been fired. He looked at her hazel eyes. Then he looked at his daughter's hazel eyes. He stood up slowly, a man waking from a long, dark dream. "Wait," Dominic commanded. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. Henri, who had grabbed Sarah's arm to drag her away, let go instantly. "Dominic, let's go," Vanessa said, her voice rising in panic. "This is a scene. The press will be here. We need to leave. Now." "I said wait!" Dominic roared, turning on Vanessa with a look so ferocious she actually took a step back. He turned to Sarah. Sarah was trembling, tears streaming down her face, her hands covering her mouth. "Who are you?" Dominic asked, stepping closer to her, ignoring the spilled wine, the staring crowd, and his screaming fiancé. "Why did my daughter just speak for the first time in 3 years to you?" Sarah couldn't breathe. She looked at the crying child who was reaching for her. She knew, with a mother's instinct that defied all science and logic, that the doctor had lied. The death certificate was a lie. The empty grave she visited every Sunday was a lie. Sarah choked out, I think she's mine." The silence in the gilded cage was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually preceded an explosion. Dominic Caldwell stood like a statue carved from ice, his gaze shifting between the sobbing waitress and his daughter, who was still reaching out, her small fingers opening and closing in a desperate plea. "You think she is yours?" Dominic repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Do you realize the weight of the accusation you just made? You are accusing me of kidnapping." "No," Sarah stammered, shaking her head violently. "No, sir. Not you. I was told my baby died. But she looks exactly like my mother, and she knows me. Look at her." "This is insane," Vanessa scoffed, though her voice was an octave higher than usual. She grabbed her clutch, her knuckles white. "Dominic, This woman is clearly mentally unstable. It's a con. She sees a rich man, she sees a vulnerable child, and she invents a sob story. We are leaving. I'm calling security to have her detained for harassment. Vanessa signaled to the 2 large bodyguards standing by the entrance. Get her out of here, now. The bodyguards stepped forward, their shadows falling over Sarah. Sarah shrank back, the trauma of the last 3 years rising like bile in her throat. She was just a waitress. They were titans. She was going to lose again. No! The scream came from the high chair. Lily had managed to undo the buckle. Before anyone could react, the 3-year-old girl threw herself forward. She didn't have the coordination of a normal toddler. She tumbled awkwardly, falling toward the hard wooden floor. Lily! Dominic lunged, but Sarah was faster. Driven by a reflex she hadn't used in years, Sarah dropped to her knees, sliding across the polished floor. She caught the child inches before her head hit the ground. The impact of the catch bruised Sarah's elbows, but she didn't feel it. She only felt the small, warm body in her arms. Lily didn't cry from the fall. Instead, she buried her face into the crook of Sarah's neck, her small hands clutching the rough fabric of Sarah's uniform, so tight her knuckles turned white. The child let out a long, shuddering exhale, the sound of someone finally coming home after a long war. Mama, Lily whispered into Sarah's neck. Safe. Dominic froze. He watched his daughter, a child who flinched when nannies touched her, a child who sometimes refused to even hold his hand, melt completely into the arms of a stranger. Vanessa stomped her foot. Get that dirty woman away from her. She's probably full of diseases. Quiet, Vanessa, Dominic snapped. He didn't look at his fiancée. He walked over to Sarah, who was rocking Lily on the floor, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Dominic crouched down. Up close, he saw the resemblance. It wasn't just the hazel eyes. It was the shape of the jaw, the curl of the hair. It was undeniable. What is your name? Dominic asked gently. Sarah. Sarah Miller. Sarah, Dominic said, his voice firm but lacking its earlier coldness. I need you to stand up. You are coming with us. What? Vanessa shrieked. Dominic, you cannot be serious. You are taking a waitress to our home? She's a grifter. Dominic stood to his full height and buttoned his suit jacket. My daughter has not spoken a word in 3 years. Today she spoke 3, all of them directed at this woman. If there is even a 1% chance that she is telling the truth, I will burn the world down to find out. If she is lying, he looked at Sarah with a gaze that could cut glass, then she will wish she had never been born. But we are going to find out tonight. He turned to his head of security, a massive man named Frank. Frank, bring the car around. Sarah comes with us. Vanessa, you can take the second car. I am riding with you, Vanessa insisted, her eyes darting nervously between Sarah and Dominic. No, Dominic said, picking up his daughter's diaper bag. You're too upset. I need calm. I'll see you at the estate. Dominic extended a hand to Sarah. She hesitated, looking at his expensive watch, then at her own red, work-worn hands. But Lily was still clinging to her neck, refusing to let go. Sarah took his hand. He pulled her up. Do not let go of her, Dominic instructed. I never wanted to, Sarah whispered. As they walked out of the restaurant, the paparazzi were already gathering outside, flashbulbs popping like lightning. But Sarah didn't see them. She only saw the golden curls resting on her shoulder, and she smelled the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. For the first time in 3 years, the hole in her heart felt a little less empty. But behind them, standing amidst the spilled wine and broken glass, Vanessa Holt pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed a number she hadn't used since the day Lily was born. "It's me," Vanessa hissed into the phone, watching the limousine pull away. "We have a problem. The dead mother just served us dinner. And Dominic knows. Fix it, or I take you down with me." The limousine was quieter than the restaurant, but the tension was louder. Sarah sat on the plush leather seat, feeling entirely out of place in her stained uniform. Lily was asleep in her lap, her thumb in her mouth, her other hand still gripping Sarah's collar. Dominic sat across from them, pouring himself a drink from the car's crystal decanter. He didn't drink it. He just held the glass, staring at Sarah. "Talk," Dominic said. "Start from the beginning. And do not lie to me, Sarah." Sarah took a shaky breath. 3 years ago, October 14th, I went into labor early. I was working 2 jobs trying to save up. I didn't have insurance, so I went to the county clinic. But there were complications. They transferred me to St. Jude's Memorial. Dominic's eyes narrowed. "St. Jude's? That's a private hospital. Very exclusive. Why would they take a charity case?" "I don't know," Sarah said. "I was in too much pain to ask. They rushed me in. They sedated me. I remember a doctor with a silver watch and a scar on his chin. Dr. Fletcher. He told me everything was going to be fine." Dominic's grip on his glass tightened. "Go on." "I woke up hours later." Sarah's voice cracked. The room was dark. Dr. Fletcher was there. He looked sad. He told me there had been a cord accident. He said my daughter was stillborn. He said it was a mercy she didn't suffer. She looked down at the sleeping child. I begged to see her. I begged to hold her. But they said no. They said it was against protocol because of the condition of the body. They said they would handle the cremation for me, free of charge, as a kindness. I was 23, alone and on heavy painkillers. I believed them. Dominic leaned forward. "October 14th, he repeated. "That is Lily's birthday." "Who is her mother?" Sarah asked boldly, looking Dominic in the eye. "Who do you think gave birth to her?" Dominic looked out the window at the passing city lights of Seattle. Vanessa Holt. We were casual. It wasn't a serious relationship. When she told me she was pregnant, I did the right thing. I proposed. I supported her." He paused, a dark shadow crossing his face. "But the pregnancy was strange. She never let me go to the ultrasounds. She claimed she was high risk and needed a specific specialist, Dr. Fletcher, who didn't allow partners in the room due to sterility protocols. I thought she was just being paranoid. She went to St. Jude's to give birth. I was in London on business. She told me the due date was 2 weeks later. When I flew back, Lily was already born. The pieces were falling into place, snapping together with the terrifying precision of a bear trap. "Did Vanessa nurse her?" Sarah asked softly. Dominic shook his head. "No. She said she had an infection. She used formula from day one, and she never bonded with Lily. She treated her like an accessory, a prop for photos." Sarah stroked Lily's hair. "A mother knows her child, Mr. Caldwell, and a child knows her mother. This is my daughter." The car slowed as it approached the Caldwell estate, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking Lake Washington. "We are going to verify this," Dominic said, his voice hard. "I have a private doctor meeting us at the house. He will take a sample from you and Lily. We will have the results in 4 hours. But Sarah." "Yes?" "If you are right," Dominic said, and for the first time there was a glimmer of dangerous protectiveness in his eyes, "then Vanessa Holt has stolen 3 years of my life and your entire world, and I will make sure she pays for every second of it." The car stopped. The door opened. As they exited, another car screeched into the driveway. Vanessa jumped out, looking disheveled and frantic. "Dominic!" she cried, running up the steps. "You cannot let that woman into our house. Think of the security risk." "The only risk here, Vanessa," Dominic said calmly, blocking her path to Sarah, "is the truth. And it seems you are terrified of it." "I am trying to protect this family," Vanessa yelled. "If Sarah is lying, the DNA test will prove it," Dominic said, ushering Sarah and Lily inside. "Why are you so afraid of a simple swab, Ness?" Vanessa went pale. "You called a doctor. He's already upstairs." Vanessa watched them enter the house, her face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. She waited until the heavy oak doors clicked shut. Then she retreated into the shadows of the porch and pulled out her phone again. "He's running a DNA test," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Tonight, you have to stop it. Hack the lab, switch the samples, I don't care. If this comes out, we go to prison for life. Do you hear me, Fletcher? For life." The penthouse of the Caldwell estate was a marvel of modern architecture. But to Sarah, it felt like a sterile museum. Everything was white, chrome or glass. It was beautiful, but cold, except for the nursery. Dominic led Sarah into Lily's room. It was the only room with colour, soft pinks and creams, but it was filled with untouched toys. "Put her down here," Dominic said softly. Sarah laid Lily in the crib. The moment her back touched the mattress, Lily stirred. Her eyes flew open, panic instantly seizing her features. She sat up, her mouth opening for a silent scream. "I'm here," Sarah soothed immediately, leaning over the rail. "Mama's here." Lily saw Sarah, and the panic vanished. She reached out, grabbed Sarah's hand, and held it against her cheek. She closed her eyes and went back to sleep instantly. Dominic watched from the doorway, a lump forming in his throat. He had spent millions on therapists, specialists, and nannies. None of them had been able to get Lily to sleep without a sedative or hours of crying. This waitress had done it with 2 words. "Dr. Aris is ready in the library," Dominic said quietly. Sarah nodded. She gently extricated her hand from Lily's grip, replacing it with the soft edge of the blanket. She followed Dominic down the hall. In the library, a grey-haired man was setting up a small medical kit. This was Dr. Aris, Dominic's personal physician for 20 years, a man of absolute discretion. "Good evening, Dominic," Dr. Aris said. He looked at Sarah with curiosity, but no judgment. "This is the young woman." "Yes. We need a rush on this, Aris. Use the private lab in Bellevue. I want the courier to take it personally." "Understood." The procedure was quick, a swab of Sarah's cheek. Then they went back to the nursery and gently swabbed the sleeping Lily. 4 hours, Dr. Aris promised, packing his bag. "I'll call you the second the sequence is confirmed." Once the doctor left, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It was the waiting game now. Dominic poured a glass of water and handed it to Sarah. "Sit. You look like you're going to faint." Sarah sat on the edge of a leather sofa. What happens when it comes back positive?" Dominic paced the room. "Then I destroy Vanessa, but I need to understand how. How does a woman fake a pregnancy for 9 months? How does she walk out of a hospital with someone else's baby?" She had a surrogate belly, Sarah realized, the memories of tabloid photos flashing in her mind. "I saw pictures of her in magazines. She always wore loose clothing, or she was bedridden for months. People just thought she was being a diva." "And the birth?" Dominic ran a hand through his hair. "She timed it. She knew I was in London. She needed a baby born on that specific week. You were the target." "But why?" Sarah asked. "Why go to such lengths?" Money, Dominic said flatly. My father's trust fund. It stipulates that I only inherit the controlling stake of Caldwell Industries if I produce an heir by my 30th birthday. Vanessa knew that. If she married me but gave me no child, she'd get a generous allowance. If she gave me an heir. She secures her place as the mother of $1 billion legacy. Dominic walked over to a desk and opened a laptop. I'm going to look into this, Dr. Fletcher. If he's involved, there will be a trail. He began typing furiously. Sarah watched him, feeling a strange sense of vertigo. Yesterday, her biggest worry was making rent. Today, she was sitting in a billionaire's library, unraveling a conspiracy. Here, Dominic said, pointing at the screen. Dr. Anthony Fletcher, Chief of Obstetrics at St. Jude's. But look at his financial disclosures. Sarah looked. It was a wall of numbers she didn't understand. He was nearly bankrupt 4 years ago, Dominic explained, his finger tracing the graph. Gambling debts. Then, 3 months before Lily was born, his debts were paid off completely by a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Dominic clicked a few more keys, and that shell company, Blue Heron Holdings, is a subsidiary of the Holt Family Trust, Vanessa's family. They bought my baby, Sarah whispered, horror washing over her. They paid off a doctor to steal my baby and tell me she was dead. We have the motive. We have the connection, Dominic said, his eyes burning with a cold fury. Now we just need the DNA to lock the cell door. Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse flickered. Dominic frowned. That's odd. The generator should... Total darkness swallowed the room. Dominic? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Stay put, Dominic commanded. Frank, he yelled for his security chief. There was no answer. The electronic locks on the library door clicked. Clack, clack. They were locked in. Security system reboot, Dominic muttered. Or a hack. A phone rang in the darkness. It wasn't Dominic's. It was the landline on the desk, an old-fashioned secure line. Dominic picked it up. Who is this? Vanessa's voice came through the speaker, calm and terrifyingly cheerful. Dominic, darling, you really should have listened to me. The power is out. The security cameras are on a loop. And Frank? Well, Frank is taking a little nap downstairs. What have you done, Vanessa? I'm fixing our family, Dom. I sent some friends over to collect the trash. Send the waitress out. If she leaves now, she can disappear. Maybe move to Mexico. If she stays, well, accidents happen in the dark. Stairs can be so slippery. If you touch her, Vanessa, I will kill you, Dominic growled. Empty threats. You're locked in the library. But the nursery is unlocked, isn't it? Sarah's heart stopped. Lily, she gasped. You wouldn't, Dominic said, his voice shaking with rage. I need to take Lily to a safe place, Vanessa said. She's confused. She needs her real mother, not some waitress. You have 2 minutes to decide, Dominic. Give me the girl and the waitress, or things get messy. The line went dead. Dominic dropped the phone. In the dim light of the moon, filtering through the window, Sarah saw his face. It wasn't the face of a businessman anymore. It was the face of a soldier. She's going for Lily, Sarah cried, rushing toward the locked door. She pounded on it. Let me out. She's going to take her. Stand back, Dominic ordered. He grabbed a heavy iron statue from the mantel, a modern art piece. He swung it with all his might against the door handle. Clang. The wood splintered, but the lock held. Again! Sarah screamed. Clang! The door flew open. Stay behind me, Dominic ordered. He reached into a drawer in the desk and pulled out a sleek, black handgun. Sarah gasped. I told you, Dominic said, checking the chamber. I will burn the world down. They ran into the hallway. The penthouse was pitch black, illuminated only by the city lights below. Shadows seemed to move in every corner. They sprinted toward the nursery. The door was open. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs like a sledgehammer. She burst into the room ahead of Dominic. The crib was empty. The window leading to the fire escape was wide open, the curtains billowing in the cold, rainy wind. "No!" Sarah screamed, running to the window. She looked down. On the metal landing of the fire escape, 2 floors down, she saw a large man in dark clothing, carrying a struggling bundle. And standing next to him, struggling in her heels on the metal grate, was Vanessa. "They have her!" Sarah yelled. Dominic was beside her in an instant. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look for the stairs. He holstered the gun and swung his legs over the windowsill. "Dominic!" Sarah cried. "Lock the door behind me," he commanded, "and call the police." He jumped. It was a 10-foot drop to the next platform. Dominic landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact, then sprang up like a panther. Below, the man carrying Lily looked up. He saw Dominic coming. "Go!" Vanessa screamed at the man. "Get to the car!" The chase was on, and this time it wasn't about money or DNA. It was a hunt. Dominic hit the metal grating of the second-floor landing with a bone-jarring impact. Pain shot up his shins, but the adrenaline flooding his system acted as a potent anesthetic. He didn't pause for a microsecond. Below him, in the torrential Seattle downpour, the mercenary Vanessa had hired, a brute of a man named Gregor, was struggling to navigate the slippery fire escape stairs while clutching a screaming Lily. Vanessa was already on the ground, kicking off her Louboutin heels so she could run faster toward the garages where the cars were parked. "Faster, you idiot!" Vanessa shrieked over the roar of the wind. "He's coming!" Gregor glanced up, his eyes widening, as he saw Dominic vault over the railing of the second floor, bypassing the stairs entirely to drop the final 10 feet to the wet grass. It was a reckless, suicidal maneuver, the kind of thing a man only does when his entire universe is at stake. Dominic landed in a roll, mud splashing over his bespoke suit. He groaned as the breath left his lungs, but he scrambled to his feet instantly. He was 20 yards away from them. "Give me my daughter!" Dominic roared, his voice cutting through the storm. Gregor reached the bottom of the stairs. He looked at Dominic, then at the terrified child in his arms, and pulled a knife from his belt. "Back off, Caldwell, or I cut the kid." Dominic froze. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. His chest heaved. He held up his hands, palms out. "Don't. You hurt her, and there is nowhere on this earth you can hide." "Get in the car, Gregor!" Vanessa yelled, fumbling with the keys to Dominic's backup SUV, a heavy-duty Range Rover. She finally jammed the fob, and the lights flashed. Inside the penthouse, Sarah was not watching helplessly. The moment Dominic had jumped, a switch had flipped inside her. The fear that had paralyzed her for 3 years. The fear of authority, of poverty, of loss, incinerated in the heat of a mother's rage. She didn't wait for the police. She grabbed a heavy bronze candelabra from the hallway table, a solid piece of metal weighing 5 pounds, and sprinted for the elevator. It was too slow. She cursed and threw herself at the door to the servants' stairwell. She ran down 4 flights of stairs, her socks slipping on the polished wood, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Mama, safe!" Lily's voice echoed in her mind. "They are not taking her again." Sarah burst out of the side door of the mansion, just as the Range Rover's engine roared to life. In the driveway, the standoff was breaking. Gregor, seeing Dominic hesitate, smirked. He adjusted his grip on Lily, who was thrashing and biting at his arm. "Be quiet, brat!" Gregor growled, shaking the child. "No!" Dominic lunged forward, unable to control himself. Gregor slashed the knife through the air, forcing Dominic to dodge left. The blade caught the fabric of Dominic's sleeve, slicing through the wool and drawing a line of blood on his forearm. Dominic ignored the wound. He tackled Gregor around the waist, driving the larger man into the wet gravel. The impact jarred Lily loose. She tumbled onto the grass, screaming. "Get her, Vanessa!" Gregor yelled, grappling with Dominic. Dominic was a fit man, a boxer in his youth, but Gregor was a killer. He drove a knee into Dominic's ribs, winding him, and raised the knife for a killing blow. "Dominic!" Sarah screamed. She didn't run for Lily. She ran for the fight. With a primal yell, Sarah swung the heavy bronze candelabra with both hands like a baseball bat. It connected sickeningly with the side of Gregor's head. Crack! Gregor collapsed instantly, the knife falling from his limp hand into the mud. Dominic rolled over, gasping, clutching his bleeding arm. He looked up at Sarah. She stood over the unconscious thug, chest heaving, rain mixing with the tears on her face, the makeshift weapon still gripped in her trembling hands. She looked like a warrior goddess carved from marble and fury. But the danger wasn't over. "Lily!" Sarah dropped the candelabra and spun around. Vanessa had seized the opportunity. She had grabbed Lily from the grass and dragged the screaming child toward the open door of the idling Range Rover. "Get in!" Vanessa screamed, shoving Lily into the back seat. Vanessa jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door. She gunned the engine. "No!" Sarah sprinted toward the car. Vanessa saw Sarah in the rearview mirror. A twisted, malicious smile formed on her lips. She didn't put the car in reverse to leave. She put it in drive. She aimed the massive vehicle right at Sarah. "You ruined everything!" Vanessa screamed, stomping on the accelerator. The SUV surged forward. Sarah stood her ground. She wasn't thinking about physics. She was looking through the windshield at Lily, who was pounding on the glass. "I am not leaving her." But before the impact could happen, a deafening crash echoed through the estate. The front grille of the Range Rover exploded inward. A black armored sedan, Frank's security vehicle, had rammed the SUV from the side, T-boning it and driving it off the driveway into the stone fountain. Frank, the head of security, groggy but conscious, had managed to crawl to the backup vehicle. Steam hissed from the crumpled radiators. The horn of the Range Rover was blaring continuously. Dominic and Sarah ran to the wreckage. Dominic ripped the back door open. "Lily!" The child was shaken, crying hysterically, but unharmed thanks to the car seat Vanessa hadn't bothered to buckle her into. She had tumbled to the floorboard, protected by the front seats. Dominic pulled her out, hugging her so tight he thought he might crush her. "I've got you," he sobbed into her hair. "I've got you." But Lily wasn't reaching for him. She was looking over his shoulder. "Mama!" Dominic turned. Sarah was standing there, her hands covering her mouth, her legs finally giving out. She sank to her knees in the mud. Dominic walked over and placed Lily into Sarah's arms. The reunion was visceral. Lily wrapped her small legs around Sarah's waist and buried her face in Sarah's neck, inhaling deeply. Sarah buried her face in the girl's curls, rocking back and forth, wailing a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The sound of a soul being put back together. Dominic knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around both of them, shielding them from the rain with his own body. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The flashing blue and red lights cut through the darkness, illuminating the scene. The billionaire, the waitress, and the child huddled together in the mud, while the woman who had tried to steal their happiness sat dazed and defeated in the wreckage of her greed. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers reflected off the wet pavement of the Caldwell estate, painting the scene in surreal strokes of color. But for Sarah Miller, the only reality was the weight of the child in her arms. Paramedics tried to take Lily to a stretcher, but the 3-year-old let out a blood-curdling scream the moment anyone but Sarah touched her. "Let me," Sarah told the EMTs, her voice hoarse but commanding. "I'm going with her. I'm not leaving her side." Dominic stepped forward, his arm bleeding through his ruined suit jacket. "She goes," he told the lead paramedic, "and so do I." At Harbour View Medical Center, the atmosphere was a chaotic mix of high-stakes trauma and hushed whispers. Because Dominic Caldwell was a billionaire, the hospital administration cleared an entire wing of the pediatric floor for them. Sarah sat in the armchair beside the hospital bed, refusing to change out of Dominic's oversized coat that she had thrown over her waitress uniform. Lily was finally asleep, hooked up to a monitor that beeped in a reassuring rhythm. The doctors confirmed she was physically unharmed, just bruised and exhausted. Dominic stood by the window, watching the rain streak against the glass. He had been stitched up, 12 stitches in his forearm, but he hadn't sat down once. "You should sleep," Dominic said, turning to look at Sarah. "I can't," Sarah whispered, her eyes fixed on Lily's chest, rising and falling. "I'm afraid if I close my eyes, I'll wake up in my apartment, and she'll be gone again." Dominic walked over and pulled a chair close to hers. He sat down, invading her personal space in a way that felt protective rather than intrusive. "I owe you an apology," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for how my fiancé treated you, for the world treating you like you were invisible. You saved her, Sarah. You saved both of us." Sarah looked at him. The cold billionaire she had served at the restaurant was gone. In his place was a father who had almost lost everything. "I didn't do it for you," Sarah admitted honestly. "I did it because I felt it, in my bones. When the doctor told me she died 3 years ago, a part of me died too. Tonight I got that part back." At 4 a.m., the door opened. It wasn't a nurse. It was Dr. Aris, accompanied by 2 police detectives and a grim-faced woman in a suit, Dominic's lead attorney. "We have the results," Dr. Aris said. He didn't look at his tablet. He had the numbers memorized. The room went silent. The only sound was the heart monitor. "Probability of maternity," Dr. Aris stated clearly, "is 99.99998%. Sarah Miller is the biological mother of Lily Caldwell." Sarah let out a sob, a sharp, jagged sound that she quickly stifled with her hand. It was the sound of 3 years of gaslighting being shattered. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't a grieving woman making things up. She was a mother. "And the paternity?" Dominic asked, his jaw tight. "You are the father, Dominic," Aris confirmed. "Dr. Fletcher is in custody. He's already cutting a deal. He provided the police with the digital records. Vanessa Holt used an IVF clinic to fertilize your sample with a donor egg she claimed was hers, but she never went through with the implantation. Instead, she paid Fletcher $500,000 to find a suitable donor from the charity ward, someone young, healthy, and lacking the resources to fight back." The detective stepped forward. "She stole your baby via a staged C-section, Ms. Miller. She falsified the death certificate. It's one of the most complex cases of infant abduction and fraud we've ever seen." Dominic stood up, a dark fury radiating off him. "Where is she?" "Processing," the detective said. "She's been denied bail due to flight risk. She's demanding to speak to you." "She will never speak to me again," Dominic said icily. "She will speak to a judge. And then she will speak to a prison wall." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal depositions and media storms, but inside the Caldwell estate, a quiet transformation was happening. Sarah didn't return to her cramped apartment. Dominic insisted she stay in the guest wing, but Lily had other ideas. The child who had been mute for 3 years was now making up for lost time, but only with Sarah. If Sarah left the room, Lily would panic. So, Sarah moved into the room adjoining the nursery. It was a strange, delicate dance. Sarah was a waitress who had scraped by on tips. Suddenly she was living in a mansion with a staff of 10. She felt out of place among the silk drapes and marble floors. One evening, a month after the incident, Sarah was in the library, reading a book on child psychology. Dominic walked in, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Chamomile," he said, setting one down. "I noticed you weren't sleeping well." "Old habits," Sarah smiled wearily. "I'm used to working the night shift." Dominic leaned against the heavy oak desk. "I fired the staff at the Gilded Cage," he mentioned casually. "The manager, Henry, and the security team that let Vanessa threaten you." Sarah looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Dominic said. "Anyone who disrespected the mother of my child doesn't deserve to work for me." He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made Sarah's breath hitch. "Sarah, you don't have to stay in the guest room. You don't have to feel like a guest here. This is Lily's home. It should be yours, too." "I don't want your money, Dominic," Sarah said softly. "I just want her." "I know," Dominic replied, moving closer. "That's exactly why I trust you. Everyone else in my life wanted something from me. Vanessa wanted the status. My business partners want the capital. You're the only person who walked into the fire just for love." He reached out and gently took her hand. His fingers were rougher than she expected, warm and solid. "We have a lot to figure out," Dominic whispered, "but I don't want to do it alone anymore." 6 months later, the King County Superior Court was packed to capacity. The press dubbed it the Heiress Snatch Trial. Vanessa Holt sat at the defense table. She looked haggard. The prison orange washed out her complexion, and her blonde hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was limp. When Sarah walked into the courtroom, Vanessa glared, but there was fear behind her eyes now. The trial was brutal. Vanessa's defense team tried to paint Sarah as an unstable woman who had surrogacy regret, claiming there was a verbal contract. But then, Sarah took the stand. She didn't need a script. She didn't need coaching. She simply told the story of the blue plastic bear. "I bought it for 99 cents, Sarah told the jury, holding up the cheap plastic charm that Dominic had saved. "I held it when I was in labor. I wanted it to be the first thing she saw. When they told me she died, I kept it. For 3 years, I kept it in my pocket. And when I saw her at the restaurant, I didn't see an heiress. I didn't see a billionaire's daughter. I saw the only person in the world who belonged to that bear." There wasn't a dry eye in the jury box. Then came the audio recording, the phone call Vanessa made to Dominic while he was locked in the library. "I sent some friends over to collect the trash. Accidents happen in the dark." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. "We find the defendant, Vanessa Holt, guilty on all counts: kidnapping, fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy." When the judge read the sentence, 25 years in a federal penitentiary, Vanessa finally broke. She screamed, lunging toward the gallery where Dominic sat. "I made you!" she shrieked. "You were miserable before me. She's a nobody. She's a waitress." Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't even look at her. He turned to Sarah, who was trembling slightly, and placed a kissing hand on her cheek. "It's over," he murmured. 1 year later. The Caldwell estate had changed. The sterile white furniture was gone, replaced by comfortable, lived-in sofas. There were toys scattered in the living room. The silence that had once haunted the halls was replaced by the sound of running feet. It was Lily's 4th birthday. The garden was decorated with balloons, not an excessive gala-style event, but a backyard party with friends, family, and a bouncy castle. Sarah sat on a picnic blanket, watching Lily chase a butterfly. Sarah looked radiant. The shadows under her eyes were gone, replaced by a glow of contentment. She wore a simple sundress, her curly hair loose in the wind. Dominic walked over, carrying a slice of cake. He sat down beside her, loosening his tie. "She's happy," Dominic said, watching their daughter. "She is," Sarah agreed. "She talks so much now. I can barely get a word in." "She takes after her mother," Dominic teased, nudging her shoulder. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah froze. She looked at him. "Dominic, I'm not proposing because of Lily," Dominic said, his voice serious. "And I'm not proposing because it's the right thing to do. I'm doing this because, for the last year, I've realized that I was the one who was asleep for 3 years. You woke me up, Sarah." He opened the box. It wasn't a diamond the size of a skating rink. It was a vintage ring, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds, matching the color of Sarah's and Lily's eyes. "Sarah Miller," Dominic said softly, "will you make this house a home? Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the ring, then at Dominic, and finally at Lily, who had stopped chasing the butterfly to watch them, a massive, chocolate-covered grin on her face. "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Yes." Dominic slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and passion. "Mama! Dada!" Kissing. Lily giggled, running over and jumping onto them, knocking them both back onto the grass. Laughter filled the air, rising up past the trees, past the gates, and into the open sky. They weren't the billionaire and the waitress anymore. They were just a family. And as Sarah held her daughter and her future husband in her arms, she realized that while money could buy silence, it took love to finally find the words. I can't believe how much Sarah had to go through to get her happy ending. Seeing Vanessa finally get justice in that courtroom scene was so satisfying, wasn't it? It just goes to show that truth always has a way of coming out, no matter how deep you try to bury it. If you cried happy tears when Dominic finally proposed, hit that like button. I want to know how many of you are rooting for this family. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. I have a new story dropping next week about a CEO who goes undercover as a janitor to find a wife, and the twists are insane. You won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.